watched all of it, not from like a perspective of like a negative perspective, but from like trying to replicate perspective.
Oh,
we
so
both dated
like
that
she,
girl.
except she was trying to like go further. It's like,
I was legit obsessed with becoming that person. It's like I watched it and I was like, you get this is like a story about like the person being bad. It's like I want to be like Theranos, and I was like, oh, okay.
oh, shit.
Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready.
Yeah.
Alright.
And hello, everyone. And this is the second Transhumanist podcast.
Yeah. It's only taken us like 2 months between episodes.
We want to do one every 2 months, and then the third one will be after 3 months.
Nah, man, we don't have much time. It's going to be like AGI in the singularity. We'll have like 3 podcasts max.
It's just like Bitcoin. It's the halvening. You know?
Yeah.
Every episode becomes more valuable.
Should we take guesses on which one's going to be the first AI podcast? Like which one's just going to be AI agents sitting here talking?
Oh, shit. That's what we should do next. We should just have like another AI agent just feeding in.
That will be...
Yeah. Run it in the corner over here next to your 3D printer.
Oh
Get
my
like a
God.
tiny box in
Some
there.
holograms.
Ah.
Isn't that what GPT-5 will have? It'll have speech to voice and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah. We were just talking about the bloody AI waifus, man.
We were talking about it.
we were talking about that. Hang on. Oh, is that just me? Was it?
Was just you talking to yourself?
It's like every conversation now you have with your AI waifu will just become an
Got AI
episode.
waifu. Her name is Stephanie. And she's a lovely lady.
All
Calling me
right.
right now. It's like watching me from like some sort of camera. It's like, fuck. Can you imagine that? Like, you know, you have like stalkers now, but can you imagine like an AI waifu stalker? Like that would be fucking cool. Like, you're like, you're just not gonna wait. Like,
What you doing?
What are you up to?
She can see what you're up to.
You said you're at the library. Why are you at with Vanessa?
GPA location -13542.
Yeah, you're just walking along the street with one of your friends, you see one of the cameras.
You said you'd prompt me right. What? This is some freaking mid prompts, man.
You were faking it. You were faking each prompt. No, I faked every time. No,
It's like
Where
you
am I
go, what is it? The waifu, what is your obsession level? 80%. Yeah, bring it down to like 40%, please.
Ah, yes, yeah. That's when you know, like, yeah, they're gonna like trying to kill us all. Like that's the point when you start to like meddle with it and start to control it and trying to make it lie to you,
oh my God.
which is what they're doing right now, right?
Yeah, well,
why-
that's the thing about that, right? It's like they're already so design the algorithms and like they make them so good, but then to a certain extent they have to put this layer on top, which makes it politically correct, right?
Yeah.
So now, as soon as you, that's a bad precedent, right? Because as soon as you start incorporating the ability for that language model to lie,
Shit.
then where's the line? Where's the line where it actually like? Where's an okay line? Where's like a
You're
detrimental
reinforcing
line?
it. You're reinforcing it that it's good to lie because you're creating better outputs. It's like,
And
it's
who's,
okay, honey.
who's making that decision? It's like,
No,
That's it, man. That's
Yeah,
it. The base model. Like, you got to get to the base model. Everyone needs to have their own base model.
Well, it's like it's such a fascinating point. I don't know. Yeah, like I find this such a fascinating point because like I mean like how much like let's take an average newspaper and like not even a lie, let's say, like the way that you use words.
Spin.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like
It's already there.
it's like the US have a policy of containment of Soviet Russia. It's like what is once you have accepted the premise that of that, and then everything else is framed within that.
I like the
Right.
worldview.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But like you're like setting up a specific worldview, so it's sort of like war and terrorism, or it's like,
Oh.
or it's
Yeah, yeah.
That has a name. It's called the Overton window or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's like when the ideas are like, is it okay enough for society to accept? But yeah, you're saying like the propaganda machine, right? So yeah, the funny story is like the Russian propagandist talking to the American guy and is like, oh yeah, we've got propaganda and it's great, but it's got nothing on what the US has. And the US guy's like, what propaganda?
That's
It's like,
exactly right.
exactly.
Oh, that's exactly right. It's like everyone's like, oh, like Asia's so corrupt. I mean, they just bribe people in plain sight. not like the West. And
Yeah.
it's like so deep. It's actually like deep in our language. And what was it? Those I was thinking, and it's not even just about lying. It's about like when people, like a big thing at the moment is like mental health, and like people say mental illness, they don't say mental wellness. I was talking about this with my brother. And like if you just consider those two sorts of
the
ideas, they
language.
both have like a vector,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
like when
yeah.
you think about your health, do you think about like being like getting to wellness, or do you think about the fact that you're ill?
Yeah.
Right? It's like
Baked in. It's like in certain languages they don't have like. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point, right? Because when I think about it, is like if we think about it, is English actually the best language to train the language model off?
Yeah.
Because there's so much
bad at it.
complexity and unnecessary complexity in that language. Like, what if we've got relatively good translation algorithms now. What if we were to translate human knowledge and history and all the articles, etc., that we use as input? And I'm sure someone must have looked at this, right? Like,
Yeah.
into a language which is more logical and sensibly constructed than English, which has all these edges.
right.
Would it?
Esperanto.
Would you?
Yeah.
Esperanto,
Yeah.
man. Or Chinese, freaking Chinese characters, man. And one word is like a paragraph. Like it's got the etymology as well, all behind it. But like that's what I'm saying. Like China's training the largest. Like they're saying the singularity is going to happen in China, because like I actually thought the opposite. I thought that LLMs in China would be so censored that it wouldn't be very good. But that's at the fine tuning layer, like you're saying. Their base model, they could still use that to run the entire country. And so they got the biggest data set, 1.4 billion people. Everything's hooked up. Social credit scores already there. Sense time cameras all the place. You've got like the digital twin of every single human in China. It's going to have like the ultimate freaking SheNet moment, right? You're going to have like one big supercomputer that's just Xi Jinping. And with Xi Jinping thought, that's part of the manifesto, mate. You got to go on. But
that's interesting. I mean, communism came out of Europe, right? But I don't know. Yeah, like I think that's really interesting, because obviously, like, even if they have the largest data set, they only have the largest, like we spoke about this last time. They only have the largest data set of like that culture, that set of values. I suppose, like it's interesting what you're saying, Oliver, in the sense of like, how do we? Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like, what if we just invented a language that was more closely representative of, let's say, like a mathematical view of the world or something like that? Would be super interesting. Or we invented a language that removed deception and lying.
You know what? Code don't
Somehow.
lie.
I don't even know how that would work.
Does code lie?
Does code lie?
Does code lie?
I mean, like, I don't know, if else error. I don't know. I suppose like maybe
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
I think
don't know.
that's where like that's what GPT-4 works so well. It's got like a bigger training set on GitHub, and like and Stack Overflow and everything. So it's got that. It's learned that language, right? Not just coding language or human language has a way to actually construct reasoning. And coding is the best type of language for reasoning.
The language is just a way to think. So as long as you can think, I wouldn't really be concerned with the actual language necessarily. But I mean, I can see your point with it's got biases and built-in issues. But
the benefit of it is like, the lowest common denominator can use it now, right? Like it's like being able to turn something hugely technical, like to the stuff that your brother's writing, right, into something that you can tell high school teachers so they can teach on to their kids. We were just talking about this in the car. We're like, there's freaking different levels of complexity. You have to abstract it down to just get to the average person.
the abstraction allows you to think complex thoughts. If you don't have a language framework, you can't really think think beyond your emotions, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, like, it's really interesting, right? Because like what made ChatGPT so big? Like, this technology's been around for a while. People have been training language models for a while, but it's that accessibility layer, and it's the same thing when I look at it. And I think it's like, that's why I think it's the biggest innovation in technology since cloud computing, because what cloud computing did was like abstract away the difficulty of networking, storage, compute, running an operating system, all that memory management, all that stuff, and just make it so anyone could just log into a console and just spin up massive pools of infrastructure. And if you look at LLMs, what ChatGPT did really well is they abstracted away all the complexity of what was like training a model, testing a model, running a model, and all the knowledge and like downloading Python libraries from GitHub and trying to update your TensorFlow version and just like into a simple text box within a web portal where you could just ask it a question.
It's pip install for your mind. Like you just freaking out, right? Like, we were just actually now we were talking about this. Like, what's the next layer after that, right? So we got to the point where language is now like your way to actually communicate how you want software to do shit and output. And we're like, all right, well, what's the next one above that? And it's fucking go all the way to the source, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could. Though, I mean, right to the source is like, I suppose, we're talking about this, thinking about this. And I feel like it'd be cool to like go in the steps there to get towards the thinking. But obviously the language of the brain is thinking itself. Like, I mean, like I was thinking about that more recently, looking at, you look at a lot of the EEG and the different brain computer interface studies that are coming out at the moment where, like it's literally science fiction. It seems like science fiction, like reading some of this stuff. It's like, like using some of these, using these technologies. It seems like the end layer of this is using these sorts of technologies to understand the different sort of electrical signals going through the brain to actually translate the electrical signals from the brain into the sort of, I guess, like, into language or like visual outputs as we see them in the real world around us, I suppose. Like, so taking things from like the inner world within our mind that's like personal to us to like an outer world that we all like kind of like share information through into a format that we can understand like more freely. Like that seems like, like I know that like Pete, you like obviously brought me along to like these brain computing tutorials and these different researchers recently, which I appreciate. But like, it seems like, it's fascinating because clearly, as much as language does matter, right? As much as like these, like I'm using different languages, these language models result in something different. There are clearly like, clearly it's not just language. Clearly there are like things in the brain, right, that aren't just like constructed from like language, like if that makes sense, because like I don't understand how
we evolved to be like that. That's where it separates us, like it's actually an innovation. Language is actually what I think if you look at Neanderthals, that's like compared to hominoids, right? Freaking hell, Homo sapiens.
Yes.
Like in terms of what we can do to formulate that language, that was the difference, right? You don't. That's where there's no Neanderthals. Like they're either part of us in the DNA or pretty much passed away.
I heard my take. I heard
it's a natural selection curve.
I heard a theory that the Neanderthals were tool builders and like was it tool builders and really good at language, but they were not as social, and there were less of them. Right, which I find like a very just an interesting, like in the sense that like they're more like engineers or something.
Yeah.
I think it's like very interesting.
Take it a mix, right? That's it.
Yeah, it's like very interesting. But
another one on that point. So you've got calculators; they're still around, and then you have everything from the BlackBerry up to the Nokia they're all gone, and now we've just got iPhone-esque style stuff. So it's like, if the use case for a calculator remained, that's why we still have calculators. But maybe the use case for Neanderthals was gone.
The tools baked in. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Holy shit. So if we go to the source and like, if we actually just go from straight to the brain waves and just have that as the medium of communication. Like, I think right now there's a lot of debate on X, formerly Twitter, right? Like, they're people just they're just like pouring on each other because the format's too short, and two, you're using English, right? And so people are just like misinterpreting what the other side is saying because one, attention spans, and two, like freaking hell, that's just all noise and all up for interpretation. But if you can share like your actual thoughts and all the context that came out with that output, and then the other side was like, oh, okay, right. I see your perspective because I literally was in it, right?
That's amazing. Yeah.
I think this will actually create like that's probably world peace. Like I'm just saying, like that's like every freaking conflict that couldn't have been resolved diplomatically was because we couldn't figure it out a better way to actually harmonize.
I mean, I think like it's always like easy to look at like I agree, like having that perspective, like an intimate, like it's like understanding other people's perspectives is a really difficult thing to do. It's like an active activity. I like and like if it's like a learned skill, right? And like I think it's something like people sometimes take, like it's something I think maybe sometimes other people take for granted, or like it's easy to like not realize that, I suppose. I don't know. Like
Olive, if we were all applications, right, on the cloud, and all we had was endpoints, right, what would be the perfect architecture for those applications to actually, integrate?
It's an interesting question. I'll try to talk about in terms of what we're talking about now. If you think about like a mental model that someone's constructed, it's constructed on like a series of axioms from the ground up. It's like there's a whole baseline set of assumptions. And sometimes I think part of that difficulty in trying to understand the way that someone thinks is because some of those baseline axioms, which are held as truths for one person, not necessarily truths for another person. So you kind of like, you're talking at this abstracted level of like, oh, this is the way I'm thinking about it, but there's some baseline assumptions that are completely different. So if we talk about it in terms of architecture, ideally, like I think, especially with like, as we move towards a world where we've got less and less blockers of technology to be able to do this and more compute cycles to be able to run calculations, like explaining mental models in terms of the like that lower level and axiomatically constructing up the reasoning behind thoughts. And if we have a way to do that, whether through EEG or other technologies, of able to go through the process which would like emulate like the series of events that led to the construction of a thought, then it would be much, I think, given enough time and enough explanation and enough kind of like people reaching middle ground, people are able to understand why people think a certain perspective, but perhaps speed run that process to a certain extent.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to transfer the entire like mental model across, right? You wouldn't. Otherwise, they just become you. Yeah. Like they could potentially like lease it. Like they could like lease the compute and just like be that Age of M type of thing, like the emulation for a moment in time, and experience that. And then up to that point, like kind of like what we're doing with Rewind on the phone, like it's like that entire history plays out. And you're like, shit, that's the memory analytics component. Like, okay, I get how you got to that point. You have to speed run that entire, like from birth to like where you got to now, like all that to have that 100%. And in the meantime, we can get like just some short snippets of at least better granularity, still better than text, better than video, like better than image, better than video, better with audio, right? All of that, just even more immersive, right? So that I think that will at least bridge that gap that we currently have in our mental models of language. Yeah.
And if you make it kind of like more broad, if you look at like perspectives that people don't agree with, and let's talk about echo chambers. Like people who end up down those rabbit holes of weird Facebook groups with weird populations of people.
Microcosms.
Is that Michael or
microcosms?
Microcosms.
Michael Cousins.
Michael Cousins. That's all we need. Yeah.
Sometimes you say Michael, and I was like, the one's Michael. Aren't that weird? But pretty much, they start out somewhere like slightly away from the norm. And this might be, and like the general ones you see with this, and especially what you see in the US, is you might see people that are like, I don't know, maybe they're anti-abortion, maybe they're anti-immigration, but they're somewhere like slightly away from the general consensus in terms of like what's the political perspective that most people hold within the country, and perhaps not in America, but a general society if you look at Europe and so they start out there, but then they end up in like these like a slightly fringe community. Then they end up in a more fringe community, and they kind of go down that path where suddenly they're posting QAnon stuff on Twitter. And it's like, really, if you look at where they started, they might have started with something that was like slightly a bit odd, or like was through like general discourse would have been more open to embracing other perspectives. But because they kind of got rejected at that point and were told, no, what you're thinking is wrong, they kind of end up going down that path and eventually end up getting reinforced on the things that perhaps are based on invalid assumptions, when they could have back here been had a discussion and realized that they would like through their own thought that they perhaps had made some wrong assumptions that led them to the point. And it's like this, if you look at any extreme, like a lot of kind of those kind of extremist views, then you wonder like, okay, what's the actual initial assumption that set down this path?
Yeah.
And it could have been something so minor.
Holy shit.
It could have been something so long ago.
Yeah.
But a lot of those things aren't generally caught till so late in the process because, because effectively because that radicalization, because those echo chambers that are created.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. Brings to mind a few things. The first thing is like, I don't know about you, but like sometimes I've been really stressed out, or like, I don't know, like I've had like an axiom slip somewhere, right? And like I'm very like I feel like my mind just does pattern recognition like constantly, right?
Yeah.
And like I have this ability to just pattern recognition like when that happens, and just like it kind of just spins and I get very anxious, right? And that kind of like what you're talking about, like it's almost like a societal mechanism, right? Like almost what you're talking about is a societal mechanism. And then like it's funny, I was talking about this like with my brother around the ability to make sense, right? Like what we're talking, like what those people need is like sense-making apparatus. They need the ability to, I didn't realize they were so interlinked. That makes sense. Anyway, but like they need to know what is real. They need to like have axioms to be able to hang off the rest of the assumptions and the thinking and the patterns they're making.
Yeah.
That are secure, and that comes almost down to like this is really like like this is fascinating, like that idea is, it needs, it's almost like if we had what you're talking about, like an architected system where we have like people's minds in like an interconnected, interpersonal computing, the Steve Jobs one, but like interconnected system type stuff, right? Like, could you like is what like one culture believes and another culture believes, is what one person believes or another person believes, is there a way to like determine like
Consensus.
what like consensus, but also like to make a common sense of reality?
And that's like kind of what community nodes is trying to do, right? It's kind of like you have these sort of different tiers of like trustworthiness, and you have community put in for it. But Zuck's already done this, right? He's already plotted the anti-hero's journey to QAnon. Like he's got the social graph all the way since you were born, all the way when he started landing on the network. So like it's there. It's about what will incentivize engagement. Like at the end of the day, it's like how do you have something that would actually make money at the end of the day? That's because otherwise it doesn't get clicks. Right?
That was his goal. His goal was engagement, which pushed people down these rabbit holes.
That's the real, it's like metrics of success drive the behavior, right? So if you think about it, it's like, what's the incentive for anyone to actually get someone out of an echo chamber? Like, what's the economic incentive? Is there one? Or is there more economic incentive to push them down a certain rabbit hole so they're like sitting in their shed in the middle of the desert trying to like buy ammunition for their guns at like thousands of
But they're buying they're buying the bullets from your e-commerce store.
Oh, speaking of e-commerce, you guys can get this from quotageous.com, the humanity H+ hat, which is transhumanism, Australia right here. Right? It's slightly different to the Wikipedia version of H+. I like that Roy touch, right? Slightly different, so on brand. But yeah, thanks, Roy. Thanks for getting these, man.
No worries.
We'll get a bigger pack for the rest of the transhumanists at the next monthly meetup.
We will order in bulk. That's right.
That's it.